The message arrived on a Tuesday morning, cutting through every communication channel Earth possessed. It was not a greeting. It was a plea. Commander Elena Vasquez stood in the United Nations Space Command Center, watching the holographic display flicker to life. The alien face that appeared was almost bird-like, with golden eyes that held something humans recognized instantly. Fear. "People of Earth," the alien said, its voice translated by systems humanity had only possessed for 3 years. "I am Ambassador Thalen, of the Confederation of Aligned Worlds. We require your assistance. A great darkness spreads across our territories. We are requesting military aid." The room fell silent. Earth had been part of the galactic community for barely a decade. They were the newcomers, the species that had only just figured out faster than light travel. And now, the advanced civilizations were asking them for help. Vasquez felt her heart beat faster. This was what humanity had been waiting for. A chance to prove they belonged among the stars. The Confederation explained the situation over the following days. A species called the Devourers had emerged from the dark spaces between spiral arms. They consumed everything in their path. Planets, ships, people. They were not interested in communication or negotiation. They only hungered. 12 alien civilizations formed the Confederation. They had thousands of ships, technologies that made human weapons look like toys, and centuries of military experience. But they were losing. The Devourers adapted too quickly, learned too fast, and never stopped coming. Earth's leaders debated for 3 days. Some argued humanity should stay out of an alien war. Others said this was exactly why humans had reached for the stars, to stand with others against darkness. Finally, the vote came down. Earth would send help. Vasquez was chosen to lead the mission. She was a career officer who had fought in the last conflicts on Earth before humanity united under one banner. She knew war. She knew sacrifice. She understood what it meant to stand when others would run. The fleet assembled in orbit around Mars. 30 warships. It did not sound like much. And it was not. Earth had only 90 military vessels in total. They were sending 1/3 of everything they had. Each ship carried between 200 and 500 crew members. Nearly 12,000 humans would go to fight for aliens they had never met. On the flagship Indomitable, Vasquez addressed her commanders via video link. Their faces filled the screens around her, men and women from every nation that once existed, now united under Earth's banner. "I will not lie to you," Vasquez said. "We are the smallest contribution to this fight. The Confederation has promised us technology, resources, and a place at the table of galactic powers. But that is not why we go. We go because it is right. We go because when darkness comes, someone must stand against it." The ships jumped to faster-than-light travel, crossing distances that would have taken lifetimes at older speeds. The journey took 2 weeks. During that time, Vasquez drilled her crews constantly. They practiced formations, ran combat simulations, and studied everything the Confederation had shared about the Devourers. The aliens had sent biological data, tactical reports, and recordings of battles. Vasquez watched the footage late at night in her quarters. The Devourer ships were not built, they were grown. Living vessels that moved like schools of fish, covered in what looked like dark chitin. They fired weapons that were part biological, part technological, tearing through shields and armor with terrible efficiency. When the human fleet arrived at the staging grounds near the Helios sector, Vasquez felt her breath catch. The view screens showed thousands of ships, vessels of every design imaginable. Some looked like crystals that caught starlight. Others were sleek and metallic. Some seemed to be made of living coral or woven light. The Confederation fleet filled the space around 3 moons, a display of power that dwarfed anything humanity had ever assembled. The Indomitable received docking clearance at the command station, a massive structure that served as the Confederation's mobile headquarters. Vasquez took a shuttle across, accompanied by her tactical officer, Commander James Park. Inside the station, they met the Confederation leadership for the first time in person. There was Ambassador Thalen, the bird-like creature from the original message. Beside him stood a being that looked like living stone, General Kethros of the Granite Hegemony. A creature made of flowing water in a containment suit represented the Fluid Collective. Others stood behind them, representing civilizations humanity had only read about in databases. Commander Vasquez, Thalen said, his translated voice formal. We are grateful for Earth's contribution to our cause. Vasquez noticed how Thalen's eyes did not quite meet hers. She noticed how the other leaders stood with their backs straight, their postures radiating something that looked like barely concealed dismissal. We are here to help, Vasquez replied carefully. Where do you need us? General Kethros stepped forward. His body rumbled when he spoke, like grinding boulders. Your vessels will take position in the forward screening elements. You will serve as early warning and first contact with enemy forces. Park tensed beside her. Vasquez kept her face neutral, but her mind was already processing what that meant. Forward screening was where inexperienced forces were placed. It was also where casualties were highest. Understood, Vasquez said. When do we deploy? Tomorrow, Thalen said. The Devourers are 2 days from breaking through to the civilian colonies beyond this sector. We must stop them here. Vasquez and Park returned to the Indomitable. In the privacy of her ready room, Park spoke what they both were thinking. They are putting us in the most dangerous position because we are expendable. Vasquez looked out at the massive Confederation fleet through her window. Somewhere out there, beyond the light of distant stars, the Devourers were coming, and humanity would be the first thing they would meet. Then we make sure we are not easy to spend, she said. The Devourers arrived exactly when the Confederation predicted. They came in silence, their bioships emerging from the darkness like nightmares made solid. Vasquez watched from the Indomitable's bridge as sensors detected them. At first, there were dozens, then hundreds. Then the count stopped climbing because there were simply too many to track individually. They moved in patterns that seemed random but were not. Like a flock of birds or a school of fish, each ship knew where the others were without needing to communicate. All ships to battle stations, Vasquez ordered. Her voice carried across the fleet, through encrypted channels. Hold formation. Wait for the Confederation's signal to engage. The human fleet held position at the forward edge of the battle space. Behind them, the massive Confederation armada began moving into position, thousands of ships organizing themselves into strike groups and defensive formations. It was impressive. It was overwhelming. Surely nothing could stand against such power. The Devourers closed the distance. At 500,000 kilometers, the Confederation gave the order to fire. Space lit up with weapons fire. Energy beams, projectile weapons, missile swarms, and technologies humanity had no names for. The combined firepower of 12 advanced civilizations unleashed at once. The Devourers flew directly into it. Their formations shifted and flowed like liquid. Some ships were destroyed immediately, torn apart by the incredible assault. But others adapted. Their armor changed, reflecting or absorbing energy that should have killed them. They scattered, regrouped, and kept coming. They learn fast, Park said beside Vasquez. Every weapon we use, they adapt to. Vasquez gripped the arms of her command chair. All ships, prepare to engage. Use conventional weapons first. Save our experimental systems for when they have adapted to everything else. The human fleet opened fire. Railguns launched tungsten rounds at a fraction of light speed. Missiles with fusion warheads streaked toward the enemy. Humans did not have energy shields or quantum disruptors. They had metal and explosives, and the engineering to make them very effective. The Devourers had not seen these weapons before. The rounds punched through their bioarmor. The missiles detonated in nuclear fury, consuming entire clusters of enemy ships. For a brief moment, the human section of the battlefield became a killing ground. Then the Devourers adapted. Their armor thickened where the rounds hit. They learned to shoot down the missiles before they arrived. The advantage lasted maybe 6 minutes, but in those 6 minutes, humanity had destroyed more devourers than some Confederation species had in the entire battle. Vasquez allowed herself a tight smile. They can learn, but they are not unbeatable. All ships, shift to pattern delta. Keep them guessing. The battle became chaos. Ships from a dozen species fought in a three-dimensional battlefield that stretched across millions of cubic kilometers. The devourers were everywhere, moving between formations, targeting weak points, learning and adapting with every passing minute. Then Vasquez's communication officer looked up, confusion on her face. "Commander, I am receiving retreat orders from multiple Confederation vessels. They are saying they need to pull back, to regroup." "Which vessels?" "All of them, Commander. Every Confederation ship is receiving withdrawal orders." Park pulled up the tactical display. Sure enough, the massive alien fleet was beginning to disengage. They were not retreating slowly, or in organized fashion. They were breaking contact as fast as their engines could push them. Vasquez felt ice in her veins. "Get me Ambassador Thalen! Now!" The communication officer tried for 30 seconds. "No response, Commander. The Confederation command ship is not accepting our hails." On the tactical display, the picture became horrifyingly clear. The Confederation fleet was pulling back in all directions, moving away from the battle. And the human fleet, positioned at the forward edge, was now completely surrounded by devourers with no support behind them. "They left us," someone whispered on the bridge. Vasquez stood from her chair. "All ships, this is Vasquez. The Confederation has withdrawn. We are on our own. Begin emergency protocols." Park was already working his console. "Commander, I am picking up civilian evacuation ships from the colonies behind us. They are trying to escape the sector, but they are slow, completely unarmed. If the devourers get past us, those ships will be slaughtered." Vasquez looked at the tactical display. In one direction, the Confederation fleet fled to safety. In the other direction, hundreds of civilian ships limped away from their homes, filled with alien families who had done nothing to deserve this. "How long do they need?" Vasquez asked. 12 hours, to get to the jump point. Maybe longer for the slowest ones. 12 hours. Vasquez looked at her fleet status. 30 ships, against an enemy that numbered in the thousands. An enemy that learned from every attack. An enemy that showed no mercy and never retreated. She thought about the families on those evacuation ships. She thought about the children, whatever form children took for these alien species. She thought about how the Confederation had used humanity as bait, as something expendable, as a sacrifice to buy time for their own escape. And she thought about what humanity had always done when faced with impossible choices. "All ships," Vasquez said, her voice steady and clear. "We hold this position. Those civilian ships need time to escape. We are going to give it to them." "Commander," Park said quietly, "they abandoned us. We owe them nothing." Vasquez turned to look at her tactical officer. "We do not do this for the Confederation. We do this because it is who we are. Because when we see people in danger, we do not ask what they can give us in return. We ask what is right." She opened the fleet-wide channel. "All vessels, this is Commander Vasquez. I will not lie to you. We have been betrayed. The Confederation used us as bait and abandoned us. But behind us are hundreds of ships filled with civilians, families, people who had nothing to do with their leaders' choices. We have 12 hours to buy for them. After that, any ship that can still move has my permission to run. Until then, we hold the line." There was silence on the channel for 3 long seconds. Then, one by one, her captains responded. "Understood, Commander. We hold. The Defiant stands ready. Churchill holding position. This is the Shanghai. We are not leaving. All 30 ships confirmed. Not one broke formation. Not one turned to run." Vasquez felt something fierce and proud rise in her chest. "Very well. All ships, weapons free. Make every shot count. The Devourers, sensing the Confederation's retreat, turned their full attention to the small human fleet that remained. They came like a dark tide, hungry and relentless, expecting an easy victory. They had no idea what humanity was capable of when defending those who could not defend themselves. The first hour was the worst. The Devourers swarmed the human fleet like insects around a light. They had numbers. They had adaptation. They had every advantage except one. They had never fought humans before. The destroyer Defiant was the first ship to fall. She had positioned herself at the edge of the formation, drawing enemy fire away from the other vessels. Her shields failed first, then her armor, then her hull. But before she went down, her captain did something the Devourers did not expect. He set his reactor to overload and flew directly into the thickest concentration of enemy ships. The explosion consumed 47 Devourer vessels. Vasquez watched from the Indomitable's bridge, her jaw tight. She opened a channel to the fleet. All ships, you are authorized to use terminal protocols at your discretion. Terminal protocols. The last order any captain wanted to hear. Permission to turn their ship into a weapon when all else failed. But the Devourers were learning. They began targeting human reactors specifically, trying to destroy ships before they could detonate. The human fleet adapted in turn. They used decoys, false reactor signatures, anything to keep the enemy guessing. The cruiser Wellington lost her engines in hour 2. She could not maneuver, could not escape. Her captain, a woman named Sarah Chen, made her choice. She used the last of her power to angle the ship toward a cluster of Devourers. Then she and her crew evacuated in escape pods. The Wellington, empty but still deadly, crashed into the enemy formation like a hammer. The escape pods scattered in all directions. Most made it to other human ships. By hour 6, the fleet had been reduced to 23 vessels. The civilian evacuation ships were halfway to the jump point. Vasquez's tactical officer had been killed when a Devourer projectile had punched through 3 decks. The communications station was being operated by a young ensign who looked barely 20 years old. The Devourers kept coming. But they were changing their approach. They had lost hundreds of ships to human tactics. They were becoming cautious, testing attacks rather than committing to full assaults. It was the first time in recorded history that the Devourers had shown anything like tactical hesitation. "They are afraid of us," Park's replacement said. Commander Maria Santos had transferred from the badly damaged destroyer Shanghai. "They are actually afraid." "Right. 2-3. They are actually afraid." Vasquez looked at the tactical display. The Devourers were afraid, but they were not retreating. They were just being more careful. And humanity was running out of ships. At hour 9, Vasquez received a priority transmission from one of the evacuation vessels. The face that appeared on her screen was the bird-like Ambassador Thalen. He was on a civilian ship with his family. "Commander Vasquez," Thalen said. His golden eyes were wet, though Vasquez did not know if his species could cry. "I must tell you something. The Confederation leadership ordered us to abandon you. They said your species was expendable, that your technology was primitive, and your contribution minimal. They planned this from the beginning." Vasquez felt anger rise in her chest, but she kept her voice level. "Because you deserve to know the truth. And because what you are doing, fighting for ships that belong to the same people who betrayed you, this is something we do not understand. Why do you stay?" Vasquez thought about her answer carefully. She thought about the 12,000 humans who had come to this place, and the 7,000 who were already dead. She thought about the young ensign at the communications station, and the engineers in the reactor room who knew they might be asked to overload at any moment. "We stay because someone has to," Vasquez said. "Because strength without honor is just cruelty. Because we refuse to become what you feared we might be. We stay because we are human, and humans stand for those who cannot stand for themselves." Thalen looked at her for a long moment. Then we do not deserve you. No. Vasquez agreed. You do not. But those children on your ship do. Now get out of here, before we cannot protect you any longer. The transmission ended. Vasquez turned back to her crew. They had all heard the conversation. They knew now, officially, what they had suspected. The betrayal was complete and planned. Orders, Commander? Santos asked. We hold, Vasquez said simply. At hour 11, the frigate Courage lost life support. The crew fought in vacuum suits for another 30 minutes before a devourer weapon split the ship in half. There were no survivors. By hour 12, the human fleet numbered 7 ships. They were out of missiles, low on railgun ammunition. Shields were failing across the board. The Indomitable herself had lost 2 of her 4 engines and half her weapons systems. But the last civilian ship crossed the jump point threshold. They were safe. Vasquez opened the fleet-wide channel. All remaining ships. This is Vasquez. The civilians are clear. You have fulfilled your duty beyond any reasonable expectation. Any ship that can still jump, you have my order to withdraw. 6 ships acknowledged. All 6 began plotting escape vectors. None of them jumped. Commander, the captain of the destroyer Yamato said over the channel. We started this together. We finish it together. Vasquez felt tears on her face for the first time since the battle began. Very well. All ships, form up on the Indomitable. We make our stand here. The 7 remaining human vessels moved into a tight defensive sphere. They were surrounded by devourers, cut off from any hope of escape, running on backup power and sheer determination. Vasquez activated her ship-wide intercom. This is the commander. I want everyone to know what you have accomplished today. You saved hundreds of thousands of lives. You proved that humanity deserves its place among the stars. Whatever happens next, remember that we stood when others ran. We fought when others surrendered. We held the line. She paused, choosing her next words carefully. I am now going to broadcast a message on all frequencies. It will be heard across Confederation space. It will tell the galaxy what happened here, what was done to us, and what we chose to do anyway. Vasquez opened a channel to every communications frequency the Indomitable could reach. She knew the Confederation would hear it. She knew Earth would hear it. She knew it might be the last thing humanity said to the stars. This is Commander Elena Vasquez of the Earth vessel, Indomitable. We came to help the Confederation fight against the Devourers. We were positioned as bait and abandoned to die. But behind us were civilian ships, ships filled with families and children. So we stayed. We held the line for 12 hours against an enemy that outnumbered us 100 to 1. We lost 23 ships, nearly 10,000 brave men and women. We did not do this for the Confederation. We did it because it was right. She took a breath. We were not fighting for you. We were fighting for what you should have been, for what you could have been. We were fighting to show that honor still means something, that some things are worth dying for. The Devourers began their final assault. Every sensor showed ships closing in from all directions. To whoever finds this recording, Vasquez continued, know that humanity stood here, and we did not break. The transmission ended. Vasquez looked at her bridge crew. They were bloodied and exhausted, but they stood at their stations, ready for what came next. All ships, Vasquez said. It has been an honor to serve with you. The Devourers struck like a hammer. The human ships fought back with everything they had left. Energy weapons, railguns with their last ammunition. And when all else failed, they used themselves. One by one, the ships fell. But they fell fighting. They fell protecting each other. They fell as humans had always fallen when facing impossible odds, defiant until the very end. The Indomitable was the last ship standing. Her hull was breached in 40 places. Her weapons were gone. Her engines were failing. Vasquez gave the final order. All hands, abandon ship. Get to the escape pods. Commander, you need to go, Santos said. Vasquez shook her head. Someone needs to stay at the helm to make sure she hits where she needs to. Get our people out. Santos and the remaining bridge crew hesitated, then saluted. They ran for the escape pods. Vasquez sat alone, on the bridge of the dying. Indomitable. She aimed the ship at the largest concentration of devourers and locked the course. As the ship accelerated on its final flight, Vasquez thought about Earth, about her home, about the people who would hear what happened here. She hoped they would understand why she made the choices she did. The Indomitable struck the Devourer formation at full speed, her reactor overloading in the same instant. The explosion was visible from 3 star systems away. The news spread across Confederation space like a wildfire. Every civilian ship that had been saved carried survivors who had witnessed what humanity had done. They told the story to anyone who would listen. The recording of Vasquez's final transmission played on every news network across 12 different civilizations. On the water world of Thalassia, the Fluid Collective watched footage of the human fleet's last stand. They saw ships that were primitive by their standards, fighting with a ferocity they had never witnessed. They heard Vasquez's words. We were not fighting for you. We were fighting for what you should have been. And the Thalassian citizens poured into the streets in protest. They demanded to know why their government had ordered the abandonment of their allies. They wanted answers. They wanted justice. On the crystal spires of Luminos, the Radiant Assembly faced similar unrest. A captain of one of their fastest cruisers stood before the public and confessed what he had been ordered to do. We were told to retreat at the first sign of heavy resistance. The humans were meant to slow the enemy down while we escaped. It was calculated. It was planned. Aaron. Wyan. The confession sparked outrage across the civilization. The Radiant Assembly's leadership tried to justify their actions, claiming they had saved thousands of their own ships by sacrificing 30 human vessels. The public did not accept this reasoning. Ambassador Thalen arrived on his homeworld with his family. He went directly to the Confederation Council chamber, past the armed guards, past the officials trying to stop him. He stood before the assembled leaders and spoke words that were broadcast to every world. I was on one of those evacuation ships. My mate was there. My children were there. The humans knew we were from the Confederation. They knew we had betrayed them. They fought and died for us anyway, and we abandoned them like garbage. General Kethros, the stone-like being who had ordered the human fleet into the most dangerous position, stood to respond. We made a tactical decision. Humanity's forces were the most expendable. Their technology was primitive. Their contribution was minimal. Thalen's feathers ruffled in anger. Their technology destroyed more devourers in 12 hours than our entire fleet destroyed in the previous year. Their contribution saved 300,000 civilian lives. And their sacrifice has shown the galaxy what true honor looks like, something we have apparently forgotten. The Council tried to contain the situation. They claimed they would investigate. They promised reviews of military protocol. They attempted to move on to other business. But the people of the Confederation would not let it go. Protests grew larger. Veterans of previous conflicts spoke out. Ashamed of what had been done in their names, families of the rescued civilians marched with signs showing human faces, demanding the galaxy remember who had saved them. On Earth, the mood was different. The 3 surviving human ships limped home carrying barely 400 survivors from the original 12,000. They brought with them the black boxes and recordings from the fleet. They brought the truth. The United Nations Assembly held an emergency session. The chamber was filled beyond capacity. People stood in the aisles. The surviving captains gave their testimony, their voices flat with exhaustion and trauma. The world learned what the Confederation had done. The planning, the betrayal, the sacrifice, and finally, They learned what Commander Vasquez and her fleet had chosen to do in response. There was anger, calls for revenge against the Confederation, demands that Earth withdraw from galactic politics entirely. Some wanted immediate retaliation. Others wanted isolation, to turn inward and never trust the stars again. Then, Maria Santos, the tactical officer who had been with Vasquez at the end, spoke to the assembly. She stood at the podium in her damaged uniform, her arm in a sling, burns still healing on her face. Commander Vasquez knew what the Confederation had done. She knew they had betrayed us. And she chose to save alien civilians anyway. Not because they deserved it, not because she would be rewarded, but because it was the right thing to do. She showed the galaxy who we are at our core. If we respond with anger and revenge, we prove that her sacrifice meant nothing. The assembly fell silent. Santos continued, her voice growing stronger. The Confederation is breaking apart over what happened. Their people are demanding change. Our sacrifice planted a seed. We water it with wisdom, not blood. We show them that humanity stands for something better. The debate raged for days. Earth's response was still being decided when the new threat emerged. The Devourers, having suffered massive losses at human hands, had apparently learned something new: identification of threats. They were coming directly for Earth. The intelligence came from a Confederation monitoring station. The Devourers had changed course, ignoring other targets, heading straight for humanity's home world. They had identified humans as the most dangerous species they had encountered. They were coming to eliminate the threat at its source. Earth's remaining fleet was a shadow of what it had been. 60 ships remained to protect the entire home system. The shipyards worked day and night to build more, but they needed time they did not have. The Devourers would arrive in 2 weeks. The United Nations Security Council made a decision. They would broadcast one final message to the Confederation. Not a plea for help, not a demand for justice. Simply a statement of who humanity was. The transmission was recorded in the same UN chamber where decades earlier, nations had come together to form a unified Earth government. The Secretary General stood before cameras that would carry his words across the galaxy. People of the Confederation, this is Earth. We know the Devourers are coming for us. We know our fleet cannot stop them alone. We do not ask for your help. We do not expect your leaders to risk their ships for us. We understand that we were always meant to be expendable in your eyes. He paused, his weathered face calm. But we want you to know something. When your civilians needed saving, we did not hesitate. When we could have run, we stayed. When we could have abandoned you as you abandoned us, we chose honor instead. We did this not because we expected gratitude, but because we believe some things matter more than survival. We believe in standing for those who cannot stand for themselves. The Secretary General looked directly into the camera. We stood for you when no one stood for us. We do not ask you to return the favor. We just wanted you to know that some species still believe honor matters. That sacrifice for others is not weakness, it is strength. That we are all responsible for each other, whether our leaders agree or not. The transmission ended with a simple statement. We are humanity, and we will face what comes with dignity. Earth prepared for war. Orbital defenses were reinforced. Civilian populations were moved to shelters. The military mobilized every available vessel. There was no panic, only a grim determination. If this was humanity's end, they would face it the way they had faced the Devourers at Helios Sector, standing. The Confederation leadership watched Earth's message. They expected it to be a plea for assistance. When it was not, when it was instead a statement of principle, something shifted in the political landscape. The civilian protests grew even larger. Veterans began resigning their commissions. Some military officers openly refused orders. A grizzled Confederation admiral named Karath, who had commanded fleets for 40 years, watched the transmission 3 times. He thought about his long career, about the battles he had won, about the honors he had earned. And he thought about how those honors felt hollow now, watching a species face extinction because of decisions his government had made. Admiral Kareth made a choice. He recorded his own transmission and sent it on every channel he could access. His words were simple. Earth stood for us. Who will stand for Earth? Then he took his personal ship, a heavy cruiser that had been his command for 10 years, and set course for Earth. He knew it was treason. He knew he would be court-martialed if he survived. He did not care. Admiral Kareth was not alone. Across the Confederation, others made the same choice. Individual ships, small groups, veterans who remembered what honor meant, civilians who felt they owed a debt, even some serving officers who decided their conscience mattered more than their careers. They came in ones and twos at first, then dozens, then hundreds. They came without official authorization, without their government's permission, without any guarantee of survival. They came because Earth had shown them what it meant to truly stand for something. And they could not live with themselves if they did not answer that call. The Devourers were still coming. But Earth would not face them alone. Admiral Kareth's ship arrived at Earth 3 days before the Devourers were expected. He came alone, broadcasting identification codes that marked him as former Confederation military. Earth's defense fleet surrounded him immediately, weapons locked on his vessel. I am Admiral Kareth, he transmitted. I have come to stand with Earth. The Earth Defense Force was suspicious. They had been betrayed once, but they scanned his ship and found it was armed with full military weapons, and he was alone. Just one officer on a ship meant for 200 crew, coming to fight for people who were not his own. They let him through. He took up position in Earth's defensive formation. 6 hours later, 12 more ships arrived. Veterans from different Confederation species. Then, 30 ships. Then, 100. They came from across the galaxy, abandoning posts, ignoring orders, risking everything to be here. The Confederation governments tried to stop them. They ordered ships back to their posts. They threatened courts-martial and imprisonment. But the ships kept coming. Many of the captains sent messages to their homeworlds saying the same thing. I go to Earth because I still believe in honor. On the second day, a massive transport vessel arrived carrying supplies. Food, weapons, medical supplies, and repair equipment. It was captained by a merchant who had lost his family when the Devourers destroyed his homeworld years earlier. The humans fought for people they did not know, he said. I can do no less. By the time the Devourers arrived, Earth's orbit was filled with over 2,000 ships. They came from every Confederation species. Some were military vessels. Others were modified civilian ships with weapons bolted to their hulls. A few were ancient warships, pulled from museums, and made battle-ready again. Admiral Kareth took command of the volunteer fleet. Not because he was the highest-ranking officer, though he was, but because when the other captains voted on who should lead, his name was spoken most often. He had been the first to come. He had shown what it meant to risk everything for principle. The battle plan was simple. Earth's forces would form the core defense, protecting the planet directly. The volunteer fleet would engage the Devourers in layers, buying time for Earth's weapons platforms and orbital defenses to target the enemy. It was not a complex strategy, but complex strategies required practice and coordination that this hastily assembled fleet did not have. The Devourers emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of Earth's solar system. There were thousands of them, as expected. They had learned from their encounter with humanity and brought overwhelming force. They expected to crush Earth's defenses quickly and consume the planet. Instead, they found a fleet waiting for them. Admiral Kareth broadcast on all frequencies, so every ship could hear, so Earth could hear, so the Devourers could hear, if they were capable of understanding. This is Admiral Kareth to all vessels. We stand here today not because our governments ordered it, not because we expect reward. We stand here because Earth showed us what honor looks like. Today, we return that gift. For Earth, for those who cannot fight for themselves, for the principle that we are responsible for each other. The volunteer fleet moved forward to meet the Devourers. The battle that followed would be remembered for generations across multiple species. It was not about tactics or technology. It was about will, about people who had chosen to be here, fighting for something larger than themselves. The Devourers attacked in waves, as they always did. They adapted to weapons, as they always did, but they faced something they had not encountered before. A truly united fleet of multiple species working together, learning from each other, covering each other's weaknesses. A Thalassian watership's shields protected a damaged human destroyer long enough for it to retreat and repair. A Luminos crystal ship used its light-based weapons to blind Devourer sensors, while Earth railguns targeted them. Admiral Karath's heavy cruiser positioned itself between Earth and a massive Devourer bioship, taking damage that would have reached the planet. The battle raged for 18 hours. Ships were destroyed. Thousands died. But the line held. Every time the Devourers adapted to one strategy, the combined fleet tried something new. They shared tactics in real time. They learned from human stubbornness and alien ingenuity. On Earth's surface, billions watched the battle unfold above them. They saw ships from civilizations that had betrayed them, now fighting to the death to protect them. They saw Admiral Karath's cruiser, barely holding together, still firing at enemies that came too close to Earth. They saw the truth. Governments might betray, but people could still choose honor. The turning point came when a group of Devourer ships broke through the defensive lines, heading directly for Earth. They were moving fast, and nothing could intercept them in time. Earth's orbital defenses opened fire, but it would not be enough. Then Admiral Kareth did what Commander Vasquez had done at Helios Sector. He set his ship's reactor to overload and flew directly into the path of the Devourers. His transmission was brief. For Elena Vasquez. For humanity. For all of us. His ship detonated between the Devourers and Earth. The explosion destroyed the entire enemy assault group. It also destroyed one of Earth's oldest satellites. But it saved millions of lives on the surface below. The sacrifice broke something in the Devourer formation. They had adapted to weapons and tactics, but they had not adapted to beings who would willingly give their lives to protect others. It was a concept outside their understanding. For the first time in recorded history, the Devourers retreated from a battle they had not decisively won. The remaining Devourer ships withdrew from Earth's solar system. The volunteer fleet, bloodied and exhausted, held position to ensure they were truly leaving. When sensors confirmed the enemy was gone, a cheer went up across every ship in orbit. They had done it. Earth was saved. The survivors gathered in orbit around Earth. Nearly 800 ships remained from the 2,000 that had started the battle. The casualties were enormous. But they had won. Earth's leadership invited representatives from every ship to come to the surface. They held a ceremony in the same UN chamber where the Secretary General had made his final transmission. The chamber was filled with beings from a dozen different species. Some breathed oxygen. Others required special atmosphere suits. But they all stood together. The Secretary General spoke to the assembled heroes. You came when you did not have to. You fought for us when your own governments had abandoned us. You showed us that the galaxy is not defined by the failures of its leaders but by the choices of its people. From this day forward, Earth will stand with anyone who stands for honor. We will fight beside anyone who fights for what is right. A monument was erected in orbit around Earth. It was built from pieces of destroyed ships, both human vessels from Helios Sector and volunteer ships from the Battle of Earth. At its center was a holographic display showing the names of everyone who had fallen in both battles. The inscription, visible from Earth's surface with proper magnification, read, They stood alone so others would not have to. When the galaxy needed heroes, they answered. When honor seemed dead, they brought it back to life. The Confederation government tried to continue as before, but it could not. The civilian unrest grew too large to ignore. The military was divided, with many officers refusing to follow orders from leaders they no longer respected. Within 6 months, the old Confederation collapsed. A new alliance formed in its place. It was built on different principles, not on power or technology, but on honor and mutual protection. Earth was invited to be a founding member. So was every species whose volunteers had fought in the Battle of Earth. The new alliance was smaller than the Confederation had been. Some species refused to join, uncomfortable with the emphasis on individual conscience over governmental authority. But those who did join created something stronger than what had existed before. An alliance where standing for others was not considered weakness, but the highest form of strength. The war with the Devourers continued, but it was different now. The combined forces fought with a coordination and trust that had not existed before. They learned from humanity's tactics, combining them with their own technologies. Slowly, system by system, they pushed the Devourers back. Humanity's role in the galaxy changed forever. They were no longer the newcomers or the primitive species. They were the ones who had shown everyone else what it meant to truly stand together. Their military tactics became studied at every military academy. Their emphasis on honor and sacrifice influenced an entire generation of alien officers. In the years that followed, whenever someone questioned whether it was worth helping others, whether sacrifice mattered, whether honor was just an empty word, they were told the story of Helios Sector. They were told about Commander Elena Vasquez and the fleet that held the line. They were told about Admiral Kareth and the volunteers who answered Earth's unspoken call. And children across a dozen species learned a simple lesson that shaped the galaxy for generations to come. When someone stands alone against darkness, you stand with them, not because you expect reward, but because it is what honor demands. Because we are all responsible for each other. Because that is what it means to be part of something larger than yourself. The monument in Earth's orbit became a pilgrimage site. Beings from across the galaxy would travel there to see it, to remember what had happened, to be reminded of what they could be at their best. Vasquez's final transmission played on a loop, her words echoing across the stars. We were not fighting for you. We were fighting for what you should have been. And the galaxy, learning from its mistakes, tried every day to become what humanity had shown them they could be. They did not always succeed, but they tried. And in trying, they created something that had not existed before. A galaxy where standing for others was not the exception but the expectation. Where honor was not just a word, but a way of life. Where no one had to stand alone against the darkness because others would always answer the call. It started with 30 ships and 12,000 humans who refused to abandon their principles even when abandoned themselves. It continued with thousands of individuals who chose conscience over orders, and it became a legacy that changed the galaxy forever. They stood alone at Helios Sector. But at Earth, the world stood united. And that made all the difference.